Welcome to the third event of the Max Weber Foundation Web Forum series on the digital transformation, hosted by the German Institute for Japanese Studies, DIJ. Today's topic is data infrastructures and open science. And we have the opportunity to hear insights from three experts looking at this topic from three different angles. I am Harald KÜMMERLE, a senior research fellow focusing on the digital transformation, which is a research focus at our institute since 2019. I will moderate this event. Let me first introduce our three speakers very shortly, and then say something about the structure of the event before giving a bit of context on the topic. Our three speakers are Miho FUNAMORI from the National Institute of Informatics, Jeroen SONDERVAN from Utrecht University, and Helmuth TRISCHLER from the Deutsches Museum in Munich, who is also teaching at Munich University. After the individual talks, we have the opportunity to hear short reactions to each other talks. This gives a good start for the discussion with the audience. As we have 2 hours in total, there's plenty of time for this. Feel free to pose your questions through the Zoom chat function already before this. I will then pick up the questions from in the discussion segment. So today's topic is data infrastructures and open science. And our speakers approach the topic from different viewpoints, which reflects the nature of the problem. Open science may sound like something worth pursuing for itself, but total transparency cannot be achieved, nor is it something to go for. There needs to be a level of trust that not everything has to be made transparent in science, as in every collective activity by humans. Data infrastructures already exist. New ones have to be built while taking into account that existing data and established practices can be successfully migrated to these. I'm sure we will hear about recent developments and perhaps also about issues to be solved in the next 2 hours. Now, let me now introduce our first speaker, Miho FUNAMORI. She's Associate Professor and Strategy Manager at the Research Center for Open Science and Data Platform at the National Institute of Informatics in Japan. She has also served as board director of Force 11, a community to discuss the future of research communications and e-scholarship. Today's talk is entitled, "Who Owns Research Data at Universities? An Analysis of Research Data Management Practices at World University." Miho, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm Miho, and I work at the National Institute of Informatics, NII. And let me first share my screen. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes. So I will start with my presentation. So I'm Miho, and I work at the National Institute of Informatics. And this institute is kind of very special. It is providing the IT infrastructure to all Japanese universities. So it is providing the IT backbone, 100 gigabyte throughout Japan. And it is providing also other middle layer services such as security or federation services. It is also providing discovery service for Japanese written research articles. It is providing institutional repository cloud service. And on top, we are now also working on the research data infrastructure. And there are many IT guys doing that. And I'm more on the policy side. And this infrastructure cannot be just given to the university. There needs to be some context or policy work that to be done to be implemented at universities. And by doing so, I have been observing that the universities as institutions are increasing having more role to play in research data management. And I want to make the point, and I want to make this point through my presentation. Traditionally, until present, research is almost entirely conducted by the researcher by himself. The researcher poses questions, scrutinizes and establishes hypotheses, collects data and examines it, writes paper and presents the research. And in addition, they also raise funds. They write the grant applications and procure everything, the money. So it is no wonder that the researcher insists that the research data gained from the research activities is his or her own. When open science and research data management came into play in 2015 or 16 or so, there were many surveys done if the researchers are willing to share research data. This is just one survey done by Wiley. And at the left, you see that roughly half of the researchers are willing to share research data, but the other half do not like to share. And the reason for this that they are hesitant are here at the, to the right. And I have made it bigger here, and you will see clearly that the intellectual property or confidential issues comes at top of the concern of the researchers. At the third or fourth reason, you will also see I'm concerned that my research will be scooped, or I'm concerned about misinterpretation or misuse, showing that the researcher regards the research data as his or her own. And no one talks about the role of universities. And it is no wonder, because university is a place of teaching, and there are many roles to be done by the universities in teaching. They provide and maintain the campus. They hire faculty, lecturers, adjuncts, admit students, award degrees, assure quality in teaching, and finance and manage the university. What do the university do in research? Almost nothing. Maybe they provide the lab and do the procurement and process the grant applications, but they don't do the real research itself. It is done mostly by the researcher by his or herself. And universities were designed as a place of study in the medieval ages, and the research arm came just into play in the 19th century when the Humboldtian universities were perceived. But so it is just a recent movement that the universities are having the research arm, and it is now gradually the role of research is getting bigger now, but it has to be still confirmed or established. Now, in the modern time, we are talking about open science. And in this section, I want to talk about how the universities are facing the open science movement. So open science is sometimes defined as an umbrella term of these various open things, which I don't like very much because you don't know the scope of open science with this definition. I like better the European Commission's definition when they were describing the science 2.0. In fact, through the public consultation of science 2.0, someone thought that open science is a better naming, and they came up with the new term open science. But it was originally science 2.0, and prior to it, it was e-science. So it means that it is a new way of doing research in digital format, kind of. And this description, you will see Science 2.0 describes the ongoing evolution in the modus operandi of doing research and organizing science. And these are enabled by digital technologies, globalization of scientific community, and by the grand challenges of our times. Because open science has not a fixed definition according to the OECD's report, Making Open Science a Reality. I have been examining various open science reports throughout the world from OECD, European Commission, from Japan and Germany and so forth, and found that there are three common ideas behind all these reports. Namely, it's these three, and open science is a new way of doing research and organizing science, and it is enabled through digital technology, and it is reshaping academic value systems. So I like to understand open science as such. Now, open science as a policy is promoted in these three domains. And we all know that the open research data part is the biggest push right now, because the open access to publication, it has a long history with this open access movement, the last 2 decades or so, and open scholarly communication is still evolving and very small. And open research data has many other drivers than open science policy. It is said that data is the next oil in this new century. And there are many movements going on, like the funders' mandate on data management plan, journals' data sharing policy. There is also the scientific misconduct or research fraud, which call for evidence data. There is a reproducibility crisis that we cannot reproduce the science anymore. And there is the data intensive science and society 5.0 in Japan, industry 4.0 in Germany, or digital transformation in the whole world. These are all the drivers. And these drivers for research data management, we cannot just ask the researcher, the individual researcher, to fulfill all these demands. Some institutional entity needs to handle this. And for researchers at universities, it's the university's responsibility to act on this. So the Japanese universities wanted to establish research data policy at the universities, but they didn't know how to draft the policy. So they asked ACSIS, the Academic Exchange for Information and Environment and Strategy. It's an association of CIOs at Japanese universities. And this association builds a guideline for drafting university research data policy. And I have been leading the work group, so the talk, the analysis which I want to show you comes from this work. So because this association also didn't know how to draft research data policy, we made a survey around the world and looked into the research data policy of various countries like UK, Germany, Netherlands, US, Canada, Australia, and Hong Kong and Singapore. And we found out that there are roughly 2 types of research data policy, RDP standing for research data policy. And one is based on the open science movement, and this is more eminent in European countries. And the second type of research data policy is based on universities' compliance needs. And this you see more in United States. There is also a combination of these two types of research data policies in Australia or Singapore. But I will describe the first and second one. So open research data policy based on the open science movement. I have taken the University of Oxford's policy. And in the first part, they are stating the statement of intent. And they usually say universities as a place which creates scholarship and passes it to the next generation. It has a responsibility to ensure the widest possible access to its world-class research to the society and to all humankind, and that it has a responsibility for good practice in data management. And in the second part, they usually state the responsibility of university as well also the responsibility of the researcher. The responsibility of researcher is a day-to-day responsibility of effective management of research data, which researchers usually have done also in the past and up until present. But for the universities, they are now responsibility for giving advice for open science or research data management, providing infrastructure and training. And this is very new to the university, and they are responsible for it. As for the research data policy based on compliance needs, I have taken the Harvard University's policy. In the introduction, at the last paragraph, they are saying, ultimately, the university is responsible for complying with laws, regulations, and requirements of its research sponsors, many of which pertain to research data. So they are saying universities are responsible for complying with laws. And to do so, the university asserts ownership over research data so that they can respond to the compliance needs. And the researcher or the principal investigator PIs are just the steward or custodians of research data. And for the responsibilities, the university has the responsibility for ensuring compliance, where the researcher has the responsibility to ensure proper management and retention of research data. And at the last part of the policy, they state how to properly retain data and transfer data in the event a researcher leaves Harvard. And this fourth part, I have made a chart so that you can easily understand it. There are roughly two ways of transferring the data from the original university to the new university. For one, the researcher takes the original research data, or the researcher can also take a copy of research data. When the researcher takes the original research data, the ownership of the research data, which resigned at the original university, needs to be transferred to the new university. So the new university accepts the ongoing custodial responsibility for the research data with a written document. When the researcher takes just a copy of research data, the original university takes care of the research data even after the university, after the researcher has left the institution, and the new university cares just only for the research data created after the researcher took place at the university. There's an excellent tutorial on data management done by the RCR administrators, the responsible conduct of research. And they also state that the discussion over the ownership of research data is contentious, But ultimately, with regard to sponsored funding, the institution is considered to be the owner of such data and states the needs that the institution needs to have the ownership over the data. In any case, whether you see the open science movement's data policy or the compliance-based research data policy, you see clearly that the university as an institution has now a role to play in research data management. There are also other policy papers describing that the universities have the responsibility for research data management. Maybe you have heard of Sorbonne Declaration on Research Data Rights, which was signed by many associations of research universities around the world. And this declaration says that it is intended to promote the sharing and proper use of the data based on fair principles, but it also asks governments and research funders to provide financial means to fulfill this obligation.
Sorry, Miho, about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like this position paper done by the Alliance of Science Organization in Germany, also very much, which states that institution needs to care for the environment or infrastructure that the researcher can use the research data at swiftly and has it anytime swiftly at hand. So to sum up, the rationale for university to act on research data management is accountability issues, compliance, and the idea of university knowledge creation, preservation, passing knowledge to the next generation, and research competitiveness and research strength and visibility. So what exactly the university does is like this. They need to provide the infrastructure like the repository or storage, but they cannot just place it like that. The ICT center needs to work on it. The library needs to work on it. The research office needs to check on the research fraud or data management plans. And then it needs to be also strategic planning done by the administration. So it involves many offices to work together around research data, and this is very unusual in a university, and it's very difficult to do. And I have also made a guideline how to set up this kind of organization. This is just some advertisement that our institute NII is providing the data infrastructure for the research data management at closed environment during research activities, and after the research, providing the research data repository, and there is also the discovery services. So I have been telling you that open science is done by different drivers, and that there are many stakeholders now at play, and that the researchers are not the only player in research. And if we are to organize the stakeholders, these are the outside stakeholders, and they are the different offices supporting the researcher, and the university administration is here like a wall or the window to the outside world. And researchers should perceive the administration more as a collaborator or cooperation, as a protector of researcher, and not always think that they are acting in a top-down manner and forcing the researcher to do something bureaucratic. it was Martin Pro to say, who proposed that the universities are getting, the governance structure is getting more bureaucratic and organized when the enrollment staggers higher and higher. What I'm arguing is that it is now coming into the research arm, because students once admitted are now graduating the university and out in the society. There are many university graduates very intelligent and knowing what the universities do and have a say to the universities, how they are governed. And open science can be understood as a movement where the society have a say to the research done at universities. And this you can see also at the recommendation of open science done by UNESCO, which is to be finalized next month. So this is my concluding remark. And yes, what I want to say is that research, once done by the researcher, is now under the protection of the university administration, and that research data should be handled under shared governance by the researcher and the university administration. And ultimately that the society should be also playing together or doing research together with researcher and administration society together. So that would be my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Miho, for your talk. So we have questions, time for questions afterwards and for a discussion. Let's now proceed to the next talk by Jeroen SONDERVAN. Jeroen is open access publishing consultant for Utrecht University and has for over 14 years of experience working in scholarly publishing. He has been he has been editor and coordinator in institutions of academic publishing, including Amsterdam University Press. Moreover, he is active in various other initiatives for open publishing, in part on a voluntary basis. His topic is notions on the differences in form and speed of the transformation to open science in Europe, with special reference to experience at Utrecht University. Jeroen, please.
Thank you, Harald. I'm now sharing my screen and I hope this is working. Is my screen visible? Okay.
Yes.
And my talk is, I guess, also a bit more practical in terms of had the move towards open science, and especially focusing on what's happening in Europe, and then taking Utrecht University as an example of maybe a practical example of how we are doing implementing open science at a university level. The slides are available, so you can afterwards you can look them up using the link which is visible in the screen. Open UU and then GIJS. So let's continue. As said, I will talk a bit about what's happening with open science in a European perspective, then focusing on the Netherlands, and then zoom in on what's happening at Utrecht University. So kind of a macro, meso, micro approach. And I would definitely like to hear your thoughts about all the things that are happening regarding open science and open scholarship. As said, open scholarship. If I say open science, I also mean open scholarship. I have a lot of debates, talks, especially with the humanities and social sciences community, that have problems or issues with the term open science. I have a humanities background myself, media studies, and I like to use them both. But as said, open science is for me also open scholarship. And this is also this partly came in the presentation of Miho as well. So what has been the driving forces behind the open science movement or open scholarship movement? The desire to increase societal impact for the public, investment in science, but also the reproducibility crisis, as Miho also mentioned. And then if we look at the Netherlands, but also of course in a global perspective, but in the Netherlands we have had some big fraud cases in terms of research data and misuse of research data, which was really a driving force behind the open science movement in the Netherlands as well. And then, of course, from the library perspective, we've seen the unsustainable costing of subscriptions, subscription-based journals and publishing, and we needed a change there as well. And another thing is the last one had the global challenges, like, for instance, the climate change, but also we've seen with the corona crisis we're still in. Had global collaboration to find solutions. We've seen that it's really effective if people know about other researchers know about other research being done, open available publications, research data, but also software encoding, for instance. And just to give you an example, so I'm also an editor of the national platform Open Access.nl. And we started when the pandemic started, at least in the Netherlands, in March last year. We started this page on this national platform just to give researchers practical tools and guidelines how to open up their research. So we gave them tips and tools, and also connections to, for instance, within the Dutch universities, for instance, where they could find information, tools, or use infrastructure for opening up their research and their workflow. And up till now, it's amongst in the top 5 of the best visited pages of this website, which is really, I guess, a nice thing. So open science, and Miho addressed this as well, is more than having publications and data available, of course, and it's a lot of things. And this is not a definition for me. So what's listed here is not set in stone, but it's just to give you a few examples or a few thoughts what it could mean for you. It can be very different if you talk from a certain discipline, for instance. But on the left side, open science, open scholarship is open to participation, so no barriers based on race, gender, income, so inclusivity. Citizen science, but also an error-friendly environment, which is, I think, also one of the great advantages of this open science, open scholarship movement. Open to reuse, so the outcomes of research and throughout the entire workflow. So that can be research data, but also the documentation or coding and software. And of course, the publications coming out of this analysis and writings. But you could also think of, for instance, the posters and the conference products, or full documentation. But even if you go back to the initial writing of grant proposals, for instance, or applications, you see something going on there as well. There's even a journal or platform that you can use for posting your grant proposal documentation. And then, of course, open science also opening up to the world, and that can either be via, for instance, in translations, but also plain language explanations to increase your impact of your research to the broader public. So the outreach beyond academia as well. And I guess had the participation between stakeholders and the co-creation between stakeholders is really also an important aspect to take along in this respect. So and now I'm going to the European perspective. So the EU is already for a long time now driving force behind the open science movement. Already started in the framework program 7, where open access was already being mandated. Then Horizon 2020 came along, and now we are into Horizon Europe. And Horizon Europe is basically having an open science policy. Open science is the default. And on the right side of the screen, you can see the 8 ambitions being listed by the European Union. So open data, open research data, the European Open Science Cloud, which is now running, new metrics, new evaluation and recognition structures, the future of scholarly communication, so open access. And the EU has just started this year their own research platform, Open Research Europe. You can see it in the middle. Already a few hundred papers are already published on that platform. So they're taking also the lead in supporting infrastructure, for instance, for scholarly communication. And that being said, and Miho already mentioned it as well. So and from a global perspective, underpinning the open science, open scholarship movement, I think the UNESCO recommendations, which will be final very soon, is really a helpful moment in time to move forward from. So if we look at the Netherlands and other European countries in Europe, so we have had a few open science programs or national plans being published in the last few years or so. So on the left side, the Netherlands, I will come back to that later, but we have seen a first initial open science plan in France 2 years ago. They're now presenting their 2.0 plan, which goes much further than the first one. In Finland, they have an open science national approach addressing several topics. And they're all aiming for this 100% goal for open access to publications, but also opening and promote research data and software and coding. And also, and this is very, very important, and I will go into detail about that with the Utrecht University example, the reform of recognition and reward structures, citizen science, and much more. So, and then getting practical. So there, a lot of things are already done or being implemented as we speak. So on a funder policy level, you may have seen the Plan S, the Coalition S, plan making full and immediate open access a reality under strict requirements. Horizon Europe is more or less aligning with the Plan S requirements. So open access for publications is default. On the left bottom side, you see a few examples of national, regional, national journal platforms, mostly non-APC. So these platforms are focusing on the areas like the humanities and social sciences, but also law, that have an issue with transferring to an open access paid for model, like with the APC, the article processing charge, for instance. And then on the right side, just a few examples. This is from University of Amsterdam, and the big pile with all the examples is from Leuven in Belgium. Institutions, libraries supporting different open infrastructures and tools to make that researchers from those universities can make use of those platforms and infrastructures. So the national context in the Netherlands, as said, we have this National Plan Open Science, which was released in 2017. But we also have a joint statement by the higher education stakeholders, so Research Council, but also the Association of Universities, and many more, with a position paper for room for everyone's talent. Because if we want to move to open science, we need to take into account this reform of, for instance, the recognition and rewarding structures of academia. And open science, stimulating open science practices, is really one of the pillars of this position paper. And then it starts now. That's the so-called strategy evaluation protocol. It can be sort of compared to what the REF in the UK, the research evaluation framework, how to evaluate research and researchers and their efforts. And this is for the upcoming 6 years. And open science is really a fundamental part of this protocol. So, and then moving to the implementation, or some examples, some best practices. So at Utrecht University, we have a currently running open science program, and we address 4 topics: open access to publications, fair data and software and coding, public engagement, and recognition and rewards. And we produce this infographic on the left side to just ignite debate, but also had the talks with researchers, but also leadership, and to give an example of what it could look like if we have this transition to a science for a better world. In the strategic plan from 2021 to 2025, open science is a part. It's completely written into the strategic plan of Utrecht University. So the Utrecht University decided to have open science and the move towards open science as a fundamental part of their strategy the upcoming years. So just to give you an example, at a transition to open science, an open outlook, open attitude, and as can be read, and it affects our relationship with society, of course. Research results are made freely available to others at the earliest possible stage. Diversity of that agenda, also the structure or the close relation between research and education. It also means that we need to diversify in terms of the people we work with. We strive to reduce individual competition. I'll come back to that later in the recognition and rewarding structures. And this is falling off my screen. So, and then, so had this recognition and reward structures, because that is a crucial step towards open science implementation, or the implementation of open science. So also here on the left side, we produced an infographic just to for ourselves as well, but also for the outside world to think about. So on the left side, the old had the primary focus on research and excellence of individuals. And we want to move to a structure where you can have dynamic career paths. So people are rewarded and recognized not only for their excellent research, but also for other tasks they have. And even researchers that have more, let's say, a leadership role, or invest more in education or public engagement, they need to be rewarded for that output, for that effort as well. So this is a fundamental thing that we like to see change in, not only at Utrecht University, but on a broader scale. And you may have seen it on the right side. There was a publication in Nature. It's an interview by my colleague, Paul Boisely, who is a professor in human resources management. And it was said as the impact factor is abandoned by Dutch University, which is Utrecht University, in hiring and promotion decisions. And this has led to a huge debate, not only in the Netherlands, but also abroad. Many things can be said about this. I will keep that for discussion, hopefully. But yeah, so these are the steps we are taking in order to make it work, actually.
Jeroen, 3 minutes left.
Yes, so I will just briefly highlight some of the the examples we do in engagement with researchers, but also in making or offering support to researchers. So, for instance, in the open access part, not only Utrecht University, but on several other Dutch universities, we have the so-called journal browser, institutional journal browsers, supporting researchers in choosing the right spot, the right place where they can publish in open access. On an institutional scale, but also on a national scale, we keep monitoring what's happening with open access. And as you can see, we come from 33% in 2015. We're now on 71.4%. So it's increasing. And I just put in this slide to talk about fair data and software, but I just before this session, I put in this slide because at Utrecht University we have research data management support, which is in the library, and we have also infrastructure in place. It's called YODA, where Utrecht University's researchers can store their data, and as said, a statement as open as possible, as closed as necessary is the adage. I skipped this one because I want to pay some attention for this slide, and also this is really a practical approach. So alongside, let's say, the formal introduction of the open science program at the university level, researchers started the so-called Utrecht Open Science Community, which is really a bottom-up engagement of mostly early career researchers in the beginning, but leadership is now also part of this community, and it was really founded as being a place where researchers can sort of gather, talk about their issues in terms of how to practice open science. So we've had events about open access, but also reproducibility, sharing data, you name it. So it's really a great, I think, example of how researchers can be the agent also within this sort of policy drive. Researchers, they need to do it, and they can address all their challenges and issues in these open science community events. And in the slipstream of this this Utrecht Open Science community, others were following. So as you can see on the right side, that's the Netherlands, and almost all research universities now have their own open science community. And even in some other universities, I think in Lund in Sweden and in England there are a few, and in other parts, they're taking this example to build up their own open science community within faculty and university. Yeah. So with that, I guess I conclude here, also for the sake of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. Now to our last talk by Helmuth TRISCHLER. Helmuth is head of research at the Deutsches Museum in Munich and professor of modern history and history of technology at University of Munich. Moreover, co-director of the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society. He is co-heading the specialized information service for historical studies and one of the co-applicants of NFDI4 Memory, a subconsortium for the historically oriented research inside of a larger initiative of the National Research Data Infrastructure. In addition, he is a speaker of KULSAM. He is the speaker of KULSAM, a consortium that aims to establish an innovative research infrastructure for collections. His talk is entitled, "Why and How Should We Establish Research Data Infrastructures in the Historical Sciences, Recent Initiatives in Germany." Helmuth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Harald. I'm sharing my screen now and hope it will work. Does it?
Yes, it does.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. You already given a couple of keywords and infrastructures that I will refer to in my presentation, which is named, as you can see here, why and how should we establish research data infrastructures in the historical sciences? And this is the title of my presentation. And the answer to this double question here is, on first view, I should say, pretty straightforward and pretty clear. As to the why question, interest in digital history is growing, not at least spurred by the pandemic. The historical profession, however, is still in the early stage of grappling and reflecting on ways to utilize digital sources and tools within the humanities. To be sure, there is a long tradition of historians analyzing great quantities of data and dealing with methods and theories from various disciplines. Yet the ongoing digitization generates new challenges for the field, such as the impact that the datafication of historical sources has on the array of methods and toolboxes historians have at their disposal, as well as on their research and work procedures. In other words, digital history needs powerful research data infrastructures. As to the second question, how should we establish research data infrastructures? Well, we should do it according to, and I come back to this later, according to the FAIR principles, according to the CARE principles, also putting ethical considerations into account. We should do it in a close dialogue between service providing institutions and research institutions, and we should aim on a nationally coordinated, but at the same time transnationally collaborative effort. Now, when we look closer into the topic, the second question, the how question, quickly gets more complicated and complex and less easy to answer. In my presentation, I will refer to 4 ongoing collaborative projects in Germany to delve deeper into the how question. The first one is, you mentioned it, the Specialized Information Service on Historical Studies, a infrastructure that is funded by the German Research Foundation and has been established in 2016. It's now coming to the end of its second phase, with a third phase already accepted by the reviewers and the German Research Foundation. And it aims at no less than also transforming the, if you wish, the world of libraries from a book providing institution into service, specialized information service providing institutions. In this case, for the field of history. And here the main partner is the Bavarian State Library, with my own library, the Deutsches Museum Library, is, if you wish, junior partner for the field of history of science, history of technology, and environmental history. And as we had the German Historikertag History Day last week in Munich, this also had quite played a substantial role in really contributing to this transformation of that discipline as one which is part of, let's say, the humanities writ large. I don't want to go further into details because this, if this infrastructure is already in place, is gradually developing, always in direct dialogue and in close collaboration with the community, because I think this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is the way to do it, the how question. I come back to the how question, namely to have this interrelatedness with the user communities. I will put more emphasis on the national data research infrastructure. And here you can see the 4 consortia out of more than 20 consortia initiatives that have come to the fore. There is NFDI for culture, which is basically, all fields from media studies to film studies, etc., that deal with culture. NFDI Text Plus, which is the language and also the linguistics and all those research fields that have basically focus on texts as infrastructures. The first one is already in place. The second one will start, Text Plus will start, has been accepted and will start soon. And then there's an FDI for object, for archaeological sciences, etc., and an FDI for memory, which is history writ large. We are currently finalizing our applications and we'll hand it in to the German Research Foundation a couple of weeks from now. I will now focus on an FDI for memory, if you wish, the one I'm also one of the co-applicants. And as you can see here, it focuses on bringing together, on transforming research data management by bringing together universities, research institutes, independent researchers. It's also bringing together across institutional boards, archives, libraries, museums, collections, the CLEM institutions, and it's also integrating the information infrastructure institutes to come to a digitally integrated space. It follows what we call linkages principles, linking research, memory institutions, and infrastructures, integrating historical source criticism into data management, the hermeneutics perspective, if you wish, it's providing a network of historically oriented research communities. And an FDI for memory, for example, has not only 12 applicants with the Institute for European History in Mainz in the lead, but also 94 institutions, many of them among the universities and non-university institutions like the Max Weber, the institutes of the Max Weber Society. It aims at a knowledge order for the digital future of the past, so quite a high rising goal. It's advancing the analog digital interface of historical sources. It's generating standards for historical research, data and sustainability, as we just have heard, and it's trying to educate people and come to a kind of citizen science, citizen participation. Yeah, as said, it's crossing geographically, disciplinary, institutional, and temporal boundaries, integrating medieval history as well as early modern history, contemporary history, and of course, global history. Yeah, here you can see our scheme for the research data management strategy, finding and selecting, contextualizing, analyzing and synthesizing, and communicating. The principles mentioned here again, finding and selecting means to follow the FAIR principles, and a cooperation of researchers and memory institutions, contextualization meaning retracing the where, the who, and the why of data, research data, and closely following the processes and improving the processes of digitization. Analyzing and synthesizing, meaning to introduce new methods, big data, machine learning, new patterns, new understandings of also of pattern recognition, automated pattern recognition. And finally, communicating, meaning using digital communications, making research data available, taking the whole, again, the whole community on board, educating, providing tools also to apply, to allow the colleagues to follow this digital transformation. Okay. The NFDI for memory consists of 6 so-called task areas, ranging from data quality, where I'm mainly responsible for, to data connectivity, to data services, to data literacy, to data culture. And here you can see what it means in precisely. First, finding and selecting data obviously reflects the imperatives of the fair and care principles. Many new digital collections of source materials have been created. Too often, however, these remain fragmented, difficult to locate, and lacking interoperability. Second, creating digital research data requires contextualization and transparency. We must be able to retrace where sources come from, who created them, and why, what process of digitization were applied to them. Third, no less through machine learning and big data processing, a variety of new digitally supported methods are becoming available to analyze and synthesize historical data. These include network analysis and text-based tools that can help identify patterns in cultural expressions and thought. Fourth, digital methods open new avenues for communicating historical knowledge, not only through now established online possibilities of communication, but also by making the research data itself available. NFDI for Memory will make extensive use of innovative publication forms and formats, such as dynamic publications, edited data sets, peer review of data sets, data stories, and open educational resources. Taking together here the integration of digital methods into the historical workflow offers a fundamentally new way of handling research data. I'm now moving forward to another kind of project environment, Museum 4.0. It's also a larger project funded by the, in this case, by the Federal Ministry of Cultural Affairs, not the Research Ministry, but of Cultural Affairs. And it's a kind of flagship initiative of this ministry and of the whole federal government aiming at a kind of digital extension of memory institutions, particularly museums that are on board. And my own institution, Deutsches Museum, is instrumental in this case of, as you can see here, building up a digitalization lab, a virtual lab, providing all kinds of science communication resources and methods in new ways, hosting conferences like one that we will have in 4 weeks from now. It's called Digital Objects. The objects that we provide, the digital twins that we are creating and building up, meaning that the analog museums and the analog collections will get a kind of mirror image twin by all kinds of efforts in digitization. Some of them you can see here, iconic objects of the Deutsches Museum using advanced technologies like also CT technologies and X-ray technologies, huge objects such as a BMW car that we sent through X-ray facilities and getting new information on the object. So it's kind of complementary effort, an effort to complement what we have, what we have got from earlier generations, and try to, elaborate it and open up new ways of looking into objects, into the collections from various perspectives with new tools and also new methods, mostly in collaboration, be it with advanced institutes in the sciences like Fraunhofer Institutes, Max Planck Institutes, etc., who are specialized here. So again, it's kind of interinstitutional collaborations opened up by such large-scale information infrastructures and research infrastructures that often see memory institutions and particularly museums taking the lead. These are, if you wish, research infrastructures either already in place or about to get into operation, and that already received funding, that even have kind of history dating back to the mid-teens, and that are, of course, constantly changing and adjusting their tools and their goals to changing environments. And as we know, digitization, the digital environment is constantly changing, and not only new tools are coming up, but also new requirements, new uses, and new user demands. And as said, one of the primary goals here is to constantly adjust to changing user expectations. One of the, let's say, biggest programs that we're aiming at is to kind of valorization collections, all collections, if you wish, on the national level. And I should have mentioned it already earlier when I came to the infrastructures in place. All these infrastructures are seemingly national. National meaning that they are nationally funded, but of course all of them are internationally linked, internationally cooperatively designed, so that it's not to reinvent the wheel here in Germany. The opposite is the case. We always look beyond the national perspective, trying to collaborate and to follow the principles that are already in place. So it would be a misunderstanding to see these as national only. The opposite is the case, and that holds also true for what I'm now presenting. It's a project that we still, have to apply for. It would be the
Helmuth,
idea to build up. And
Helmuth, 3 minutes.
Wonderful. I will be coming in an end within 2 minutes. It aims at building up a national infrastructure for all collections, be it university collections, be it museum collections, be it private collections, for the world of cultural institutions, as well as for natural history museums. And the idea is to have kind of 6 action fields, but mainly is to create a digital repository for research, teaching, and education. So the aim is to develop effective tools and innovative information services to support individual and collaboratively cutting-edge research, and to digitally catalog, preserve, and network collection-related knowledge for a wide range of user groups. So it would again serve as a kind of national contact point and an expert partner for internationally active initiatives and research associations in the field of cultural heritage and digital humanities. I'm summing up what I've said, coming back to the how question. Research data infrastructures in the historical sciences should be established, probably also in many other fields, should be established by strictly implementing the open access and the open data, open science principle, following the FAIR, but also the CARE principles of data curation, bringing service providing institutions and research institutions into close conversation, crossing national, disciplinary, institutional, and temporal boundaries, not only offering innovative methods and tools, but also competency building and training service to overcome the, if you wish, the digital divide between those who are often from an elderly generation who have not been trained in such born digital data curation, and the younger generation that has grown up with these ideas. And finally, monitoring, adjusting, and enriching services according to the constantly changing needs of the scholarly community. And I've repeatedly referred to this last point because I think it's a very crucial point. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. So we now come to the reaction round. could you switch on your speakers and camera again, Miho? And yeah. So let's go in the same order as before. So, Miho, do you have to say something about the talks of the others? Do you see some points?
Yes, thank you. So I have a question to Jeroen and Helmuth as well. So I will go one by one. So to Jeroen first, about the rewarding the open science activities of researchers. So I have been observing that the research evaluation or assessment is shifting to evaluating the open science activities as well, especially in European countries. And I have seen that they are using the term from competitive paradigm to collaborative paradigm. Yes, and I have been invited to give talks at the Ministry of Education or several research universities in Japan, how the research evaluation is now shifting in the open science world. And I have been able to convince people that that we could gain much more if we are evaluating the open science. If we are just based on the competitive paradigm, only the winner takes maybe the Nobel Prize or so. But if people are collaborating, then we can achieve more and we can achieve a better result. And many researchers liked the idea and they find it very interesting and they want to do it. But then the researchers say the university is not interested in it. I have been talking to the university administration. They are also interested in it and they also see the point, but they are saying then the Ministry of Education, the country does not change the research reward system. So we cannot change it by ourselves. I have been talking to the Ministry of Education and they are saying we cannot change it because the global context, like the world university rankings, everything is based on competitive paradigm. We cannot change it. So how did the Netherlands University or Utrecht University change that? How could they change this value system by itself, where the whole world doesn't change, still doesn't change really big? What is the incentive of the university to change?
Yeah, so and what you explained sounds very Kafkaesque, right? So moving away from responsibilities, possibly. But to be clear, this is a transition. So it's not that Utrecht University suddenly decided, okay, and now we're doing it like this. So it is currently being part of also the strategic plan to go to a system where, for instance, we're not looking only at or mainly at, for instance, for tenure track or promotion to the impact factor, for instance. So we move to, for instance, more like what all is also being done by the Dutch Research Council. So it's not only Utrecht, it's also the Research Council who is now not asking the first question, list your 5 top publications with impact factor as well. No, that's question 8 or 10. And now it's so-called the narrative CV. So the researchers are being asked when they apply for a grant to explain what they did, how they come to where they are now. So this is a process. So this is just starting in the grant proposals, but also at the university levels. And there are different perspectives. So Utrecht is ahead of others in the Netherlands, but it's really a complicated process. So it started to convince researchers, but also leadership at the university. It started with a vision, right? This is where we want to move to. Then a vision document where people could respond to. We've had several meetings with the entire university, at least they could attend, about what are the issues, what is the right way to change, for instance. And as you said, so there's, I think, a lot of, especially from the early career researchers, there's a lot of acknowledgement that science is a team effort. It's not like an individual who is doing everything. This isn't true. But what the traditional system is, we only reward the individual, and that's something that is really on the minds. At least in the talks I've been attending and the talks with researchers I have, is that this is really important to take into account. So it's a team effort, collaboration, and then if we want to, so not only look at the publications attached to the impact factor, for instance, the impact of the journal impact factor, but also look at other research outputs. But those research outputs, they take time to make them ready to be open, for instance, or to prepare them for certain standards. And that time should be rewarded as well. So these are different perspectives to this movement. But as said, if we change as the only university in the world, nothing will happen again. So this whole restructuring, reform of academia, it needs to be a global thing. But yeah, step by step, I think. First mover, possibly, which could also be an issue at some point. But it's not new. So if you look at the DORA, the declaration, the San Francisco Declaration of Research Evaluation, it's already signed by several institutions in 2012 when it was launched. But up till, let's say, a few years ago, not so much practical implementation was seen. And yeah, so on a national scale, the declaration was already signed, I think, in 2014 or 15. But as Utrecht University, we decided to also sign it as an institution and start working on implementation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the other countries will follow?
Yeah, so for instance, in France, this is also highly on the agenda. The examples I gave, so in Finland, there's this also this declaration which can be signed, which is sort of comparable to the DORA declaration. And what I see in the discussions and European debates is, and also it's part of the mission of the European Union, right? So in Horizon Europe, it's also part of their goals to at least support this this reform. So, but then again, yeah, if only a few countries will follow, yeah, I don't have a we would say in the Netherlands a glazen bol, so a glass. I don't know what the translation is in English, but a glazen bol. So I can't predict the future, but it's really what we've seen in the open science communities, for instance, that this is really a debate which is really pressing and urgent. People want to see change in this respect.
Yeah. Let me just add something. The Netherlands is basically the homeland of the history of humanities research, and thinking about how to manage research in the humanities is something that Netherlands is definitely best apt to do, almost putting into the language issues, etc. Yeah. So Miho, do you also have a perhaps short question towards Helmuth?
Yes. So Helmuth, you have been describing that linkage and in the digital world that there is a fundamentally new way of handling research data, and people need to collaborate towards this new workflow. So in Japan, we have been also working on the humanities and social science data catalog. So our institute, NII, is providing the infrastructure, and it's the infrastructure where you can search for humanities or social science research data cross-disciplinary. We have been looking for a partner in humanities or social sciences, but in fact, our partner or collaborator is JSPS. It's DFK in Germany, so it's the funding agency in Japan who initiated the project. And they haven't been able to call the Society of Humanities or Society for Social Sciences into collaboration. Because the societies are not a fixed organization. It's just bunch of researchers sitting on committees, and it's kind of a virtual organization. They don't want to take responsibility, or they don't want to have a say to such data archives or data catalogs. So they are kind of absent. And also universities are not just within one discipline, so universities are not acting either. So JSPS just asked 2 or 3 researchers who have expertise in working on data archives in social sciences or historical data, and they are designing the data catalog, and we as the infrastructure provider are providing the infrastructure. Now it works for the first 5 years where JSPS has the money, and there are 4 data archives in Japan, 4 social science data archives in Japan who are selected to provide the research data to the data catalog. And there's also 1 historical institute which is providing the historical data, and it works for 5 years. After 5 years, even JSPS doesn't have the money to run the data catalog, and it needs some body which will maintain and take it forward. But whom are we going to ask for it? And in the end, it can be that the data infrastructure provider is going to run the infrastructure without any partner in the academic societies. And how are you doing that in Germany? And how many people are involved, and what kind of people are involved, and what kind of institutions are involved? And yes, that would be a question. That would be the question.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't want to paint a too rosy picture of the German landscape, but still I would say it's quite a bold initiative, this national research data infrastructure, in 2 ways at least. One, it's really covering, science writ large, including the humanities, or the social sciences, the cultural sciences. So it's really aiming at integrating the whole spectrum of great interdisciplinarity, and it even crosses, as I said, disciplinary boundaries. Although it's grounded on strong communities, scientific communities, scholarly communities. So that's the one that it's really, let's say, bottom up. It's defined bottom up. It's not top down. It really emerges from the needs, from the initiatives of the scientific communities that have been invited and asked to participate in a long-lasting process. This process goes back to, let's say, 2015 and 16, and gradually emerges over the years. Second, yes, it's still project funded. These consortia will run for 2 times 4 years, or is it 5 years? I mean, for a limited period, but at least for some period. And the institutions involved, and really it's mostly the whole community, almost all non-academic extra university institutions and I will come back to this, the role of the universities when I'm raising my question to you, but also the universities. And then the idea is probably that these institutions will be in a state of taking over after getting funding for 10 years to institutionalize these ideas, so that in the end we will have really a robust, sustained infrastructure, not just a project-based infrastructure.
You mean the institution like universities are taking over? A comprehensive university which has also the STEM fields and so on?
The consortia are taking over, and it's not just one institution. The consortia often exist of, as said, in our case, it's 12 core institutions and 94 partnering institutions in this small field of history. So it's really the community that is taking this as their project, and not just one institution, but multiple stakeholders.
But are these 14 universities also, the university administration acknowledge that it is acknowledge that it is an important project? Because it always happens that the president is sometimes a STEM field president, then he doesn't know anything about humanities and doesn't acknowledge. Now, and if it's a different discipline present, then you have more he's more favoring the Bruce project or so on. So it is
okay.
Politically very.
This is my comment to your question, to your letter. Okay, so this would be my, let's say, observation or comment to your statement that universities are taking gradually over an important role in research data management. When it comes to Germany, I would say reluctantly, yes. The driving institutions are more the non-academic, the extra university research institutions like Max Planck, like Leibniz institutions, like as said, in our case, the Max Weber Foundation institutes, whereas university chairs are not capable to contribute infrastructure long-lasting enough. So it needs support of higher university administrations, and that's not easy to get. This is one of the reasons why these research data subconsortia are mainly based on non-academic institutions, taking some university institutions on board, but not that many. Those in my field where digital history is well established and maybe even already institutionalized, but still university, there is a kind of imbalance between those two parts of the academic system.
Just one thing to add, that DIJ is member in, or will be member in, NFDI for memory, and I was present in the plenary session, in the first plenary session, and there were 140 people or something like that in a huge Zoom call.
Wow.
It's a huge initiative. And yeah, we also part in Text Plus, but this is via the Max Weber Foundation in total.
140 people actively engaged?
Well, yeah, in the meeting, more people have relations there, but yes, in the persons from the several institutions, 140 were in the call, I think, perhaps more. Okay.
Because in Japan, we have been we had a hard time to have interested researchers interested in digital humanities, because humanities, as you know, traditionally, they are not evaluated based on analyzing digital data. So you go deep into literature, and that's how humanities or history is done. So not many wanted to make the shift to digital humanities, and still the community is very, very small in Japan, I would say.
I think it also has to do with a question there, but in order to find things, you don't have to be involved in digital humanities. If you don't want your research to be flooded over, then then also people who don't work with digital methods have some skin in the game, I think. But yeah, Jeroen, do you want to pose questions?
Yeah, it's more it's more a comment, and which I can sort of try to refine into a question, but it's to Miho. So in the Netherlands we have, and you probably know the alliance between the technical universities, which have a national data repository. It's called it's now with 4 technical universities, 4 TU. It exists for a long time, and there's another national repository, data repository. It's called DANS, D-A-N-S, from the Royal Academy of Sciences, taking responsibility for research data on an institutional level. So I was wondering, because I know the Dutch field, and I know a bit about what's happening in France and other, but is this sort of national approach? Because from your talk, I understand that this is still, for instance, in Japan, there's no national coordination in this. Is there? If it's so, collaboration between universities and building infrastructure to support researchers, for instance, for their research data on a national scale.
Actually, NII, where I am, National Institute of Informatics, is kind of counterpart to DANS. So we are providing all the IT infrastructure to all Japanese 700 universities, Japanese universities.
Okay. Now, because your institution is informatics, so that, but you are allowing other disciplines as well on the platform.
Yes, that's right. So we started as a National Center for Academic Information or something like that. It started in 1986, where all the libraries were still relying on these book cards, and there was a strong need to have an electronic online discovery system which could search across the Japanese university libraries. And so that's how our institute was established. And so we were devising the IT infrastructure, the database catalog system, and in cooperation with all university libraries in Japanese universities who are putting in all the book cards data, metadata to our system. And that's how we grew up. And in year 2000, there was a strong institutional change, which made us a research institute in informatics. But this kind of service providing part was remained in our institution. Yes, and this part grew more and more, and we are now providing the IT internet backbone throughout all Japan. 100 gigabyte throughput, and yes, the security service and federation service like EduRoam, we are also providing this, and institutional repositories cloud service, which is used by 800 universities in Japan. It's also provided by us. So we are providing many of the IT services. Yes, so we are kind of cross-disciplinary, but because it's cross-disciplinary, we cannot really customize our infrastructure to one discipline. Customize it, we need some partner in scientific community or scientific academic society, which designs needs and which comes customize our infrastructure. We can build anything what they like, but we first need to know what they want to, what they need. So
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's why I was asking Helmuth how these scientific committees are working in Germany, or yes.
Yeah, and the other question I had is, and maybe that's for both for myself as well. So had the influence of so Helmuth, a big consortium like you're having, had institutions taking their responsibility, but also the complexities and also the influence of commercial partners, possibly. And so the make or buy question, is it going to be open source, for instance, or is it going to be built on proprietary software? So these questions, because they very much relate to my own field, open access publishing, for instance, as well. We see a great influence of these big commercial tech companies like Google, but also Elsevier, for instance, becoming bigger, and not only pushing out journals or articles, but also moving into data analysis and these kind of things. So that's more like a general question to, I guess, us, the panel, the influence of commercial entities in this respect.
Okay, maybe I respond to this because this is also was on my agenda to questions to ask. As for the, let's say, European Union context, I think both of you, Miho and Jeroen, you pointed and emphasized the role of the European Union with all that what you mentioned, the Science 2.0 initiative, Open Science Cloud, and everything. And I think we are fair to say this is public good. This is public money. It's always comes only with public access. And for example, all the initiatives I mentioned in Germany, you have to subscribe. You have to subscribe to the, open science and open data declaration to get funding. This is a necessary prerequisite. That this is based on the open science principle. Otherwise, this would collapse. But of course, there are, through the back door, sometimes there are, let's say, private interests coming into the play. So, for example, we had huge offers in Germany from Google of large mass digitization of library goods, and there was a kind of public debate or a controversial debate if public institutions like the Bavarian State Library, like our own library, should you go for such a private-public partnership, and there is still debate. But when it comes to the control of the data through all this infrastructure that I just mentioned, it's all about open science. And if I already have the floor, I want to, not just emphasize this, let's say, crucial role of the European Union as a catalyst, as a driver in this process, but maybe also of let's say, of the pandemic. I think, Jeroen, you was it to point to the current pandemic as a kind of catalyst for change, let's say, providing slow hope that we will move into the let's say, right direction also. But you pointed, and I was really impressed in seeing that Utrecht University is obviously looking for the big picture, not just digitization, but relating it to what we could call sustainability, the so-called great transformation that we're all heading to, or that we should all heading to, bringing together or seeing digitization also as a tool for this great transformation. So, for example, also in Germany, the German Advisory Council on Global Change just issued a new flagship report on the role of digitization as a driver, as a means towards sustainability. And we can see the easy, linkages between these two processes, or this idea of planetary health that we are facing too, that was also, that has been stressed by the experience of the pandemic. So as a head of an Environmental Humanities Institute, I can't see it otherwise than this is a wonderful combination. I would call it also a necessary combination to these to see these two processes interconnected, and that provides me with slow hope that things are moving into the right direction if I see the policy of your university.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
So was this from your side, Jeroen? To Helmuth?
Yeah, it was,
okay.
These were my points.
I guess.
I think I'm done.
Yeah, Helmuth already took over, right? Yeah.
Okay. So anything left from you, Helmuth, to the others?
No, these were the things I wanted to emphasize. I think we should invite our audience to come up with it.
Yes. We have one question already. I'll read it out as it is. This is Ross from Hong Kong. I would like to ask a question regarding open data. There are different forms of open data movement. Commercial side, like Google Maps and Scholar. The citizen side, G0V, or citizen data, and the university side. As the university counterpart, how do you evaluate the other two aspects? So, to Jeroen and Miho, I think.
From the university side, I can only say that that we need to be wary about what's happening on the commercial side. So that's also part of the discussion we currently have in the Netherlands on the highest level. So we can open up research data and for the greater good. But the influence of what commercial entities and especially I think the big tech, right? We're not talking about startups or companies that can make use of and build products, better products, but it's more like the big conglomerates like the Googles and the Amazons and we all know them, and yeah, so this is really a thing. And then also the geographical thing. So Europe can open up all the research, but if others won't be doing anything, that is also an issue we should debate. On the other hand, so citizen data or I think that, or governmental data, at universities, I talked about co-creation or had stakeholders collaborating in this sense, and I think that's really important. And for instance, citizens data, citizen science is also on the map of the Open Science Roadmap, and I think this can be very helpful and useful, although being done in a good way, right, and a sustainable way. And I think that's also that should be on the agenda as well. So yeah, these are my first comments on the different aspects of ownership, right, or responsibility.
Let me just add there. I have heard citizen science be counted towards commercial side, or rather Google using citizens through protein folding and so on for its own goals or for its own development. So this is a two-edged sword almost, the citizens coming in for the big tech platforms. Okay, Miho, do we have something?
I can just talk from Japan side, and I think in Japan, these three parts are just done in separate way, and there is no linkage or communication between them. So it's just separate. But it's not for the commercial part. I mean, Google or Amazon, they are all residing in the United States, so it's very difficult to talk to these giants to the United States, and where we are not so tech savvy. But in Japan, we have many big manufacturing company like Mitsubishi or Hitachi or Toyota or so. And we have been trying to work together on not really open data, but linking data or collaborating through data and have more open innovation sort of. But it has been and there has been several big research grants on this, where industries and universities could cooperate and work on some specific topic and where they share data, maybe in a closed way, but and work on some innovation. But it has been really, really difficult to do so, because industries, they are always competing to each other, so they don't want to. They might be able to share it to university, but when they share it to universities, they also know that their competitor will also see it. So they can share it to the university. So it has, these kind of research grants has not been going very well. So it's kind of very difficult.
Helmut, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I wish to see this as part of a big picture. And the big picture is that we need, we are in need, and I think we are on the way to a kind of a new mode of knowledge production, one that is by definition interdisciplinary, but also transdisciplinary. And if we talk about open science, open innovation, responsible research and innovation, that all points in that direction, that we need participatory elements. We need, yeah, as said, a transdisciplinary mode of knowledge production in the first place, being embedded in the science-making process. And so to me, that's the bigger picture of what we are discussing today. Open science, open information, everything that we have referred to is part of such a transition. And I would love to stress this and see this being developed in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what are we as research community giving to, for instance, the commercial partners, but what are we getting back for that as well? You could ask this question. What's in return?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Franz raises his hand.
Yeah, I thought since we are such a small group here, we could communicate this way, not typing in questions. And well, thank you, first of all, for this very, very informative exchange. And I learned a lot. I mean, I've been involved in some of these things, like Harald mentioned. We are part of this National Research Data Infrastructure Initiative for memory. And but I was wondering, I mean, of course, now it's a huge effort to sort of use the digital technology to sort of move forward with science, and that this implies very different structures, and not only the technology, but also institutional structures and incentive systems and lots of things that have to change. That's a big effort. On the other hand, I think we should not forget about, are there visions about how will, once these things are in place, how will science and research look like? What are the implications? One thing that came to my mind is that what happens with globalization is that the big grow bigger, and the smaller get even more neglected, because they try to jump onto the big train. And so these local, national ecosystems, research ecosystems, how will they be able to survive in an interconnected, open access global scheme? Is that something we should be thinking about? And yeah, well, maybe I stop here. So
just how this can be conceptualized, just one word. The algorithms just mingle through all the data that is there, calculate what cites what citation, and if you use Google Scholar, Japanese publications don't show up very much because of the coding, and the number is not very high. So yeah, it's very, well, the algorithms just have their day, and what comes out then goes into the process of scholarship, if you
it's
paint
not
a
only,
negative picture.
That's only one aspect. The other aspect is the attention. That things become. If you have a local ecosystem, maybe on the global scale, you're not considered, but at least on the local scale, you are considered.
Yes.
If you have a global system, you won't even be considered on the local scale anymore because everybody's looking on the global. So that's Helmuth. It's not only the algorithms, it's also the sort of attention and the competition that results. Yeah. Helmuth,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Franz, for bringing this to the point and to the table. And this, for me, this is why I mentioned the CARE principle. CARE, C standing for collective benefit, A for authority to control, R for responsibility, and E for ethics. So that it's also about the locality of epistemic ecosystems that you just mentioned too. It's not only about findable, the FAIR principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, these kind of technicalities or the technical infrastructure, part of the infrastructure, but also the ethical part. And I, at least in NFDI for memory, and you are part of this, and you also subscribe to this, and this is good that you mention it, it's the CARE principles, yeah, that we really look at it also from, let's say, from a post-colonial perspective, enabling, let's say, indigenous knowledge cultures, you know, to have their voices and to bring it to the fore. So I think that's very important. And these two principles have really to, you know, to be interconnected, and one is falling apart without the other. I think so. So we constantly, and particularly as humanities scholars, we have to stress this in this kind of bureaucratic, technical environment such as NFDI. It's a big thing. It's a big infrastructure. There's a new infrastructure in place, and often, you know, then let's say these kind of ethical standpoints and ethical considerations are, you know, neglected, and so we have to emphasize them.
Anybody else?
Can I?
Okay, Miho.
Yes. So I want to counter to Franz. I think open science is not going towards a standardization or globalization, but open science is more going to diversity and inclusion. And because as Jeroen said, this open science is going from competitive paradigm to collaborative paradigm. And in open science, you want to, there's room for everyone's talent, and you want to assess everyone's different contributions. So there have been many talks around diversity also in the open science movement. I think through the research recognition by doing away with the impact factor, which forces us to evaluate our researcher based on just one value system. But and there's also the call for bibliodiversity, which says that we shouldn't just look for the big high impact factor journals, but we should also value the different small journals or small academic societies and different value systems. And so open science may be a movement which is taking around the globe, so another globalization sort of, but maybe globalization 2.0, which is not just standardization, but it's going to the diverse side. And going back to the Jeroen's question about commercialization, I think this commercialization was more at the globalization 1.0, the standardization part. And when we can really successfully transition to the globalization 2.0, where the academic community or research community is taking the lead, then we could really value every diversity and acknowledge every small activities around the world. But I have a question to Jeroen. When you are rewarding the researcher at Netherlands University based on different indices, can you really do that? I mean, in Japan, I hear from many faculty members at faculty hirings, they are looking into this publication list or what the research has done, and the research so big and so inside, so much in silos that they cannot understand, even if they are in the same discipline, and they really cannot evaluate if this research is good or bad. And
yep.
How are you doing that? I mean,
I'm not doing that, but in a more general sense, so what it implies more work, right? So what we all know is that I mentioned giving your top 5 best papers, based and then adding the journal impact factor. So it's based on these metrics, some of these decisions. And I guess I mentioned the narrative CV from the Dutch Research Council being implemented in their grant proposal procedures. That implies possibly more work, so more reading of these proposals, not only looking at it's a 10.5 impact factor, and so I'm exaggerating, but I guess this is also part of the transition we're in, and make it more visible that this is possibly more important to hear the narrative, for instance. But yeah, this is part of the transition we're in at Utrecht, but also in the Netherlands, the Research Council. It's happening right now.
Yes, but it is very.
And people need to learn, and people need to adjust to it, learn it. That's, I guess, the cultural transition.
Yes, maybe you need to learn it, but it's really tough to compare two narratives which are written from different people. And then finally, if you know the evaluator and if you are acquainted with the person, then you are likely to get hired more.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. That's true. And there are lots of concerns. So I'm not sort of saying that this is the way. Lots of concerns are there, and it's now also debated. Also, starting with that Nature publication I mentioned in the presentation, we've had letters from several high-level researchers, but also the early careers were responding. Yeah, so it's heavily debated. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a small.
And I wanted to add one more thing coming from my own background. So and that's responding to Fran's question. So what is really I think a good thing to see, had to at least for open access publishing and also for the humanities, social sciences, this inclusivity. So I mentioned briefly the national platforms. I call them national platforms. Basically, they're stakeholder governed journal platforms, which is not new because, for instance, in South America, you have REDLEC and these platforms. Diamond OA, so no charges are to the authors or the institutions. It's being financed by the institutions or funders. And you see them now emerging also in several European countries. So as a sort of counter to the APC-driven model, which the big legacy publishers are now really moving into. And I guess this is a nice example. And also these local or national platforms, they take into account different languages, for instance. And yeah, so I guess this is a really nice example of how we as academia counter these sort of commercial drive towards more profit, APC models, etc., etc.
Can I add to that?
Very short.
Yes,
Almost out of time.
Yes, because in Japan, we also have this national journal platform for quite a long time, like the Cielo, we have JStage, and it is funded by the Japanese funding agency, JST. So it's every academic society can publish their journal on this platform for free. And so it's a very big, good Diamond OA platform, open access platform. But not many academic societies want to use it because it's run by a governmental system and the kind of marketing function is not there. So if you are using the commercial platforms like Scopus or Elsevier, you get the targeting direct emails, and which raises the visibility and so forth, and the impact factor of the journals goes up, and you can be sure that many people are going to submit their articles.
Yes.
With this national platform, which is not commercial based, the impact factor goes down, so the journals are losing the submitter, and so
I think that is a realistic note. I hope we see each other in the next forum next week or in other contexts. Subscribe to the mailing list, and yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.